Good morning. This is Warren Pollock, and today I want to talk a little bit about the ideology of consumerism. Now, consumerism is the on-ramp that you and I have into the oligarchy, into the military-industrial complex, into the inverted totalitarianism that is controlling us, into the draconian Republicans and Democrats that are violating the Constitution and destroying your freedom, into crony capitalism, into all of the global oppression which is occurring presently. Consumerism is really the on-ramp into all of these other words and systems, because consumerism lets you and I actively have a stake in the overall inverted totalitarianism that's in place. So consumerism is our role. Now, when politicians talk about American citizens, they use the word consumer. And there's a reason for that, because as a consumer, that's your role, that's your place as a serf in the current socio-political environment. That's your place in space and time to be a consumer. Consumers don't really think. What do? They consume. They consume, and they're interested in playing a role as a supporter of an ideology or religion. And this religion is a great thing in the control of people worldwide. You might go to Russia and find the same U.S. consumer products available to them that are available to you. Consumerism is really the linchpin, the center of gravity of the control that people are currently under. Consumerism as a religion allows the leadership to the oligarchy, of the inverted totalitarianism, of the corporations, the Republicans, the Democrats, the dictators, the left and right parties internationally. This consumerism as a religion allows for the voiding of the moral compass. So in any kind of religion, when you reach an extreme in religion, what happens is that religion then justifies extreme means. And really, all sorts of terrible things have been done in the name of laudable religions. Now, we see that in Islam. It's been present in Judaism. It's also present in Catholicism and in the Protestant ethos. We've seen times throughout history where religion has caused people to be killed en masse, caused rights of human beings to be violated. And we have Spanish Inquisitions, we have even Hitler occurring, or the World Trade Center bombing occurring, or we have the Boston bomber saying that all people who are Muslim are under a certain solidarity against the rest of the world as they take over the globe. So when you reach an extreme of religion, it gives you an escape clause to basic morality. Respect people no matter what their beliefs are. Respect people's person. Respect people's property. Well, religion in many cases, voids the moral imperative or the moral compass. So consumerism is the ultimate religion. And really, it allows the oligarchs, it allows the military-industrial complex, it allows the great military of the United States to intervene everywhere. It allows for the voiding of any kind of morality. That's why consumerism is very important. But if you try to break out from consumerism, you find that's a very difficult thing to do, because the consumer ethos, the consumer ideology, is something which is universal across Republicans, Democrats, across people who are left and right. And as I explained, with the same goods being available in Russia as they are in the United States and even China, consumerism is even transnational. And if you think about inverted totalitarianism, it is also transnational. Now, what else does consumerism have to deal with? Well, it's a fantasy, really, that is a fundamental part of any ideology, and fantasy really provides an easy answer. If I borrow money for an education and it's going to give me a great return on my investment, that's a fantasy. If I buy this good, such as a Starbucks coffee or McDonald's hamburger, it's going to make me feel good, it's going to give me prestige, it's going to give me all of these other elements of meaning in my life. And really, people think that they're enjoying the elements of ideology, but really they're suspending the meaning that life has on a very basic level. Now, we buy things to feel good. But really, we are engaged in a self-destructive cycle when we buy things from two directions. First of all, the things that we buy are not the things that we necessarily need, and the things that we buy support the corporate oligarchs, certainly. They make us feel good for a short period of time, but really they place demands on the global system which are unpayable. And really, if you think about it, consumerism has to multiply. It has to grow. And with this strange religious culture, anything and everything can be sacrificed in the name of consumerism. And consumerism is always in a state of crisis, and we need really to have this crisis right now because we see that the competing elements within consumerism are involved in cannibalizing themselves as the market share available to each diminishes with the reduced purchasing power that people are going to have worldwide. Now, we need really to be in a constant state of crisis. The oligarchy needs to be in a constant state of crisis. Inverted totalitarianism needs to be in a state of crisis. What we think of today as operable capitalism is always in crisis because this crisis allows the control to stay in place. And we really need to not necessarily grow, we need to rethink what we think of as value in perhaps more of a religious way in terms of human beings. What do human beings really need to live? What do they need to value? What would be a good standard of living for people? Would education, access to education, access to food, access to vocation be important to you? Access to a certain amount of square feet to live in? Access to be living stress-free, a single earner in a family? What would be of value to you? Because everything and anything is available to you once you dump this sort of fallacy, this sort of fantasy that is consumerism. And there's no misunderstanding. When we talk about things which are serious, most of the people that listen to what I have to say and what you may try to tell friends, they get very angry about this. And the anger is really part of the realization process. Really, they learn, when they learn it, is that you really have to force the truth down people's throats because this ideology of consumerism is so pervasive. When you take this away, the people have no place to be. For example, people are defined by their jobs. They're defined by their ideologies. They're defined by their consumerism. They're really defined by the lies that they rely upon, not realizing that these lies are self-destructive and that they're also impossible to achieve. And if you think about things on the long term, really this crisis that is consumerism is an eternal cycle of dysfunction. It's what puts consumerism into sort of this perpetual motion machine that's always in crisis. Anything can be sacrificed for the benefit of having money circulate to the oligarchs and be concentrated. It's really a destructive religious structure. Nevertheless, it is structure. And when you take away that structure, really there's nothing left. And we have some people in our society that are mythical because they are part of the capitalistic and consumer culture. Let's say Warren Buffett, for instance. He's really someone that's mythical. And he's serving as a legitimization of the consumer culture. You could buy something from Geico. You could use a rail system. You could buy a Berkshire Hathaway insurance product. And these people are laudable when, in effect, in reality, they have no moral compass. They're part of a religious structure that will do anything to perpetuate the concentration of capital and the disenfranchisement of the very people who are consumers. And if you think about consumerism, you've been disenfranchised from your political system through consumerism. It's your on-ramp into this crony capitalism. It's really an eternal cycle of dysfunction, but it is the structure by which people ground themselves to the reality. And that's sort of the Achilles heel of the whole system. That's why there's a lot of dissonance and rationalization. That's why people get angry. Because once you take away the facade, the veneer, you have no more structure, and you have people sort of wandering around without a place in society. Consumerism gives them a place within the inverted totalitarianistic system. It gives them a place that transcends really traditional ideologies. And I think that is really the linchpin that we have to address individually, is get your consumer profile down to the smallest possible footprint possible. Now, I've done this, and it's a very difficult thing to do. Consumer culture is there for a reason. Every time you buy a product, you're owned by that product. Every time you hire a corporation, you are giving your consent to the fine print that corporation provides. You are, in fact, opening yourself up to liability. Every time you sign on to Facebook, that's the case. Every time you sign on to Twitter. Those are accounts which I cancel, Facebook and Twitter. And guess what? They're tied into the NSA scandal. That's all has to do with consumerism. Where is the revenue that these corporations glean? Well, it's from the back of advertising that makes you a consumer. So every time you do something for yourself, instead of contracting with a corporation to do something, you're really pushing back on the system. You're pushing back on inverted totalitarianism. And I think that's very important. And really, what happens is with consumerism is really we're needed, and we're basically the foil, or you think about it, or basically the hero is the oligarchy, and we are the foil. We are the potential stumbling block that the oligarchy has to complete power and control. And we have to say that the consumerism as a religion is not acceptable. Really, it's a dead end without a moral compass. It's a system which puts you and I in a total state of crisis, because anything can be sacrificed in crisis. And we've seen that in the United States since 2001. We have a perpetual war, a perpetual crisis, yet President Bush said at the depth of the crisis, he said that we have to go out and buy things. That was the solution. Remember that. In 2001, as the World Trade Center was crashing, the solution was to be a good consumer, not to be a good citizen, not to understand the geopolitical situation, not to become informed, not to demand the truth from government. Instead, we accepted lies, and in exchange, we got to be participants in the military-industrial complex by being a consumer at its basic level. That consumerism is not going to work, folks, going forward. It's not going to work because the relationship between the U.S. and China, between the U.S. and Russia, well, I think actually in the long term the U.S. and Russia might actually become allies as they were historically, but we're going to find out that a lot of the supply chain, the global supply chain, is going to be at risk. Where does that put the consumer? And why are people anticipating a breakdown in consumerism? Now, we know that the system thrives on crisis. The solution, instead of to the oligarchs, is to say that we are a religion, go out and consume more, rather than addressing the problem. It's really a mask. It's a structure. It's a solve. It's an illusion, a fantasy. The basic element of consumerism, of an ideology, is fantasy. Simplification to the point of fantasy, where people are basically comforted by the structure. So if you want to know about the operable ideology in the Americas and also in Europe and Japan, now in emerging China, this consumerism is really the only tool that we have to push back on the beast, to starve the beast. This is Warren Pollock. Consider consumerism as the predominant or main ideology of the Americas and the rest of the world, and that it is a fantasy, although it gives people structure. Remove the fantasy, remove the structure, remove the value of people, and that's where we'll be in the near future, with a religion, extremism, religious extremism, that is consumerism, that is something that the global industrial complex, the military industrial complex, oligarchy, call it what you want, crony capitalism, that inverted totalitarianism, that's what they want you to be, a good consumer. Don't be good consumers, folks. Instead, start to think independently and become more self-reliant. This is Warren Pollock. Thank you for your time.